now being recorded.
Thank you. I would like to call the regular meeting of September 13th, 2021 to order. I'd like to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Repeat after me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Will the secretary please call the roll?
Thank you. Commissioner Alderette.
Here.
Commissioner Calderon. Commissioner McLaughlin.
Here.
Commissioner Ramos.
Present.
Commissioner Wu.
Here.
Vice Chair Fan.
Here.
Chair Morrissey.
Here.
And for the record, Commissioner Calderon will be absent today, and Commissioner Ramos is participating via Zoom.
Members of the public may attend planning commission meetings in person or virtually via Zoom. I now invite the commission secretary to describe the way the public can access and participate in the meeting.
Thank you, Chair. If you would like to provide a public comment, you may do so in the following ways. Join the meeting via Zoom, enter meeting ID 853-418-46306. When the item that you would like to comment on is being discussed, select the hand icon to let us know that you'd like to speak. You will be called upon by the name you entered. You may also call 669-900-9128. Enter meeting ID 853-418-46306. When the item that you would like to comment on is being discussed, press *9 to let us know you would like to speak. You will be called upon by the last 3 digits of your phone number. After you are called upon, you must press *6 to unmute yourself. For those attending this meeting in person and would like to provide a public comment, please fill out a request to speak form and turn it in over here to the secretary. All speakers will have 3 minutes to speak, and I will alert you when your time is up. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Moving on to public comments on non-agenda items. Secretary, does anyone wish to speak?
If you would like to provide a public comment on a non-agenda item, if you're participating via Zoom, please select the hand icon or press *9. We'll wait a few seconds. Chair, we do not have any speakers.
Thank you. Moving on to the consent calendar. Is there a motion to approve item A, minutes from August 9th, and item B, excused absences?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move the consent calendar for item A. Second.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Wu and a second from Commissioner McLaughlin. Secretary, please call for roll call vote.
Roll call vote. Commissioner Alderette.
Yes.
Commissioner McLaughlin.
Aye.
Commissioner Ramos.
Yes.
Commissioner Wu.
Yes.
Vice Chair Fan.
Aye.
And Chair Morrissey.
Aye.
Motion passes by majority vote with Commissioner Calderon absent.
Moving on to the business calendar. I'll now go through the public hearing protocols and review the process for public hearings so everyone knows what to expect. Staff will provide a presentation and answer questions from the commission. Next, the public hearing will be opened. Then the applicant will be given the opportunity to speak, limited to 15 minutes. Members of the public will be given the opportunity to comment, limited to 3 minutes. The applicant will be given the opportunity to respond to comments made by the public, limited to 5 minutes. The public hearing will then be closed. Discussion will return to the commission with formal action taken to approve, conditionally approve, deny, or continue review of the application. Please consider the following suggestions when organizing your comments. Please state your name and address. State whether you support, oppose, or are neutral to the proposal. Your statement should include all pertinent facts within your knowledge. Avoid gossip, motion, and repetition. A clear, concise, and non-repetitive argument is most effective. So we'll move on to the first item. This is the time and place for the public hearing on item number 1, recirculated draft program environmental impact report number 2020-03. Before we begin, do any commissioners have anything they wish to disclose in regards to this item? Commissioner Already?
No disclosure.
Commissioner McLaughlin?
No disclosure.
Commissioner Wu?
None that I know of.
Commissioner Pan?
Nothing disclosed.
Commissioner Ramos?
Nothing to disclose.
And I have nothing to disclose on this either. So now staff, Ms. Melanie McCann, will now provide a brief presentation.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. We're glad to be here tonight and to have the opportunity to spend the evening to talk about the general plan. First, as was just mentioned, we're having a public hearing tonight to allow the opportunity for the public to give comment on the recirculated EIR. We have our consultant here tonight that will be giving the bulk of the presentation, walking us through what the recirculated environmental impact report covers, etc. Just wanted to make mention that in preparation for tonight, we did notify all the interested parties that have asked to be kept in touch about general plan efforts, as well as the citywide Nixle messaging and the city managers emailing. So we've tried to get all the word out there so everyone that's interested can be aware of not only this public hearing, but also the one that's scheduled for the 25th and moving forward. So with that, I'd like to introduce Joanne Hatfield, who is a principal environmental consultant and professional with PlaceWorks. And she'll be walking us through the presentation tonight, and then we'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. Already? Oh, I thought I did. Okay. I am going to present an overview of the recirculated EIR along with some history of our previous work on the original EIR, a quick summary of the general plan update that over the last year that the EIR, recirculated EIR addresses. So this slide is my basic outline for this presentation. I'll go over the background, the history, the purpose of a recirculated EIR, the environmental process for recirculated EIR, an overview of the general plan update, the contents and findings of both the original EIR and now this draft recirculated EIR, a new alternative that's been added, a quick summary of that, and then we will provide an opportunity for public comments. So the original EIR on the general plan update kind of mirrors this year's schedule on the recirculated EIR, but was last year. Started with a notice of preparation in February. That is the only step that's different for the recirculated EIR. There's not a new notice of preparation because the original EIR serves as the scoping mechanism to define the contents of the recirculated EIR. And there's also not a public scoping meeting for that same reason. So this is the schedule of the original EIR last year, circulated for 45 days through September 16th last year. Then again, a study session, planning commission hearing, at which point the commission, you did not take action, and the process for the original EIR terminated at that point. So we started the general plan update under Melanie's direction started as of November last year with the direction from the Planning Commission in response to public and agency comments on the EIR. By February, we started the draft recirculated EIR, and we'll go through those comments. Right now, we are in the public review period, which closes September 20th, a week from today. Tonight is the study session. And then there'll be a preparation of the final EIR response to all comments received. I'll clarify how the comments need to be provided for a recirculated EIR versus the original EIR, followed by the decision maker public hearings in October and November this year. So recirculated EIR before certification of the original EIR is required per CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act, for very specific purposes. And this slide shows a bullet list of those situations which would trigger a recirculated EIR. So there are other mechanisms to update, refine an EIR. Key, of course, the recirculated EIR is that it also requires another 45-day public review period. And the primary trigger for recirculated EIR is a new significant impact or an impact that is substantially more severe than disclosed in the original EIR. Or if the EIR is just determined to be fundamentally inadequate and has to be updated, supplemented, and revised. And I will go through the reasons in particular for this project why the determination was made to update and recirculate the EIR. This is the process specifically for the recirculated EIR, which I mentioned mirrors the original EIR with the exception of the scoping process. So prepare the draft EIR that is reviewed by city staff, back and forth, corrected until it becomes the lead agency's document. Staff makes decisions on any controversy with us or debate. It becomes the city's document. The yellow boxes here identify areas where phases in the process where the public has an opportunity for input. So right now, again, that we're at the tail end of the 45-day public review, which ends next Monday. Tonight's hearing study session, where we will be taking public comments, and then the Planning Commission hearing and the City Council hearing after the final EIR is prepared. And upon approval of the project, a notice of determination is filed with the Office of Planning and Research and the county clerk. So this is an overview. This slide shows an overview of the general plan update itself, which Melanie can speak to in a lot more detail than I can. But basically, the recirculated EIR included an updated project description to include this supplemental information, primarily supplemental and revised general plan policies and implementation measures. The land use plan didn't change. The statistics for full build out didn't change. So what the change in project were policy and implementation measures. This slide, as noted, the update focused on just a handful of elements, being the community element, the mobility, conservation, land use, and urban design elements. The policies really focused on environmental justice, air quality, hazards, mental health, against so many of the issues that came up, both in comments to the original EIR and in the public hearing, in the study session and the outreach meetings. And a bulk of those comments were related to environmental justice areas, disadvantaged areas, both from pollution stand with a disproportionate impact of pollutants and hazards. Don't know why it did that. And socioeconomic disadvantages.
I'm sorry? Yeah, I think it's the TV itself. Is Tom answering?
What's happening? The screen is not, it's black, half of it, but the screen's down at the very bottom, I find, so it's something wrong with the notes. Yes, big screen. Yes. He's gonna fix that for us.
I can do a 2/3 presentation. It's a challenge I haven't had before. What's that?
You want to advance it, see if it.
We did that. On this slide, however, while he works on that, these are the primary updates in the general plan and the focus topical areas of where not only the general plan was updated with supplemental policies, but our supplemental analysis was included in the EIR. So it was the impact of the plan update and the population growth, the housing growth, et cetera, the geographic location of those relative to the environmental justice, disadvantaged communities, topic by topic. And then again, a real focus as well on recreation impacts, the impact of substantial growth on existing deficient recreation facilities in the city. I will wait for some of these exhibits because I think they're important, but the general plan is based on 5 focus areas. The development growth was within these 5 focus areas. The map you're not seeing is the boundary of those areas. Development within the balance of the city was based on the existing approved general plan and existing approved projects and specific plans. There we go. Whether or not those have been developed yet. So none of the focus areas, boundaries, again, or the development statistics for growth in those areas changed since the EIR that was presented to you last year. Okay. This is the proposed general plan land use map. Just highlights the various land uses, the light purple being industrial, yellow, orange, medium brown, all residential uses, and red commercial uses. This works pretty well. This is a summary of the build-out statistics for housing, non-residential square footage, and related jobs for the entire city, but individually shown for the focus areas. The EIR compares impacts not to the previous general plan, not to the adopted plan, but to existing conditions. So you'll see that all other areas of the city, for example, show housing unit growth of 2,847 units. Those are 2,000 units in comparison to existing conditions, although no land use designations have been changed. Same thing for specific plans, special zoning areas. An additional 15,800 units have already been approved within those listed areas cumulatively. So this impact is compared to existing conditions and not the general plan. So the real growth as designated in the general plan update are for the 5 focus areas. Those were where the changes occurred in comparison to the existing general plan. So the EIR analysis, when I start talking about the topics that we did not revisit, a lot of those are quantified analysis that relate to these statistics that haven't changed since last year. This is the mobility element, master plan of area highways. Another change that, another area that has not changed since last year, just included it for context or if we had questions. And these are the limited areas where roadways and arterials were reclassified. Again, as in last year's version of the plan. The original EIR is a program EIR, and this is a recirculated EIR of that same program EIR. So it has all the advantages, all the definition of a program EIR. It's a broad analysis that comprehensively address cumulative impacts of all the development and at a build out to year 2045. It has an advantage when the city comes back and has subsequent development proposals that are site specific. To a large extent, they can tier off of or rely on this EIR, particularly for area-wide and regional impacts, even though any given project is likely to require site-specific review, geologic, circulation, et cetera, for the site. The big picture items won't have to be revisited if the subsequent project is consistent with the general plan land use and policies. This slide lists all the 20 topics that were addressed in the original EIR, which is every single topic, environmental topic under the California Environmental Quality Act, which was expanded in December 2018, becoming effective January 1st, 2019. So they were all incorporated in the original EIR. And I will talk at some length of what the recirculated EIR addresses. Most of these topics are not revisited. They have been revisited, however, to the extent that they require revisions that came out of the responses to comments on the original EIR. So if there were corrections or requirements for information to be supplemented, all that has been done in a red line version of these original sections. The original EIR was based on a plethora of technical studies. This lists the technical studies that were done for the update. Several of them by technical sub-consultants. And this slide specifically shows the sections that are included in the recirculated EIR. And again, you'll see the focus on air quality, hazard, and recreation. The project description has a fairly comprehensive update because of all the changes in the policies and the implementation measures. So all those are reflected, they're summarized. They're also included in a red line version in Appendix B of the recirculated EIR. And then, as I'll discuss in a minute, recreation was determined to have a significant unavoidable impact. And as such, it's appropriate to include a new project alternative to address that impact. So that section was also updated with a new alternative. So the EIR, the draft EIR becomes a combination of the original EIR that was presented to you last year and these updated sections in the recirculated EIR. What I will probably repeat several times, both public and agencies, as included on the notice of availability of this recirculated EIR, are limited to commenting only on these updated sections in the recirculated EIR. We have, the city has already comprehensively addressed the response to comments for the other sections, and that will become part of the final EIR. So if we receive comments on those other sections and they don't relate to these sections or the project description update, our response will say as much. You know, please see the previous final EIR responses. This summarizes the updates. I'm down to a ninth or whatever of text to fill in. Additional analysis info provided in the recirculated EIR. This exhibit shows the environmental justice areas as designated by State of California definition of SP 1000 and the Cal Enviro indicators, which look at 21 indicators of both pollution and socioeconomic effects. So those are the pink areas that show the disadvantaged areas within the city per SB 1000. And the exhibit also shows those areas relative to the focus areas of the general plan update targeted for the bulk of new development. So the topical sections in the recirculated EIR, air quality focuses on, in large part, the impacts on environmental justice, EJ areas, an increase in cancer risk, industrial land uses, pollution burden. The indicators primarily in the Cal Enviro definition and indicators for environmental justice areas. There, if you've had a chance to go through the EIR, there's numerous exhibits to disclose this impact and existing conditions. And it was one of the topics that the public was very vocal about, saying that we hadn't disclosed it, needs to be disclosed. The decision makers have to understand the impacts that the project could add on to existing conditions that are problematic. So this section also details specifically the air quality policies updates in the general plan update. More additional analysis by a topic that's included in the recirculated EIR. The exhibit is cumulative. Now I can't see that. Cumulative pollution. It's the lead concentration in soils. Another big issue for comment on the original EIR. So that is analyzed in the hazards section, as well as detail on existing industrial facilities. We also describe the potential for new industrial facilities, the limitation on those facilities, and the updated general plan policies that would limit the impacts of those new facilities. And thirdly, the other topical area that we focus on for the recirculated EIR is recreation, addressing both the existing deficiency and ratio of available park facilities, park acreage per citizen. Okay. You use this one now?
Well, no, change it in that one, please, so you can see.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. So the light purple areas on this exhibit show areas that are already deficient in terms of park acreage by the city standards. The light blue areas are the environmental justice areas, so it shows the overlap of areas that are already park deficient. Shows the existing parks, proposed parks. This section also goes through all the supplemental policies. Most importantly, maybe the most important thing, the recirculated EIR and the primary reason for recirculating the EIR, again, is the new designation of the recreation impact of the proposed general plan update determined to be significant and unavoidable. This section describes why mitigation is not possible to mitigate that impact in the existing deficiency of parks. This is just an overview again of what the original EIR determined to be impacts that were less than significant. This list of impacts, aesthetics is the first one, so you're seeing that there. All of these impacts were determined to be less than significant with implementation of the general plan update without any mitigation whatsoever, just compliance to existing regulatory requirements and city requirements. So as you can see, we've crossed out recreation because that became a significant impact. These impacts for the original EIR were less than significant with mitigation. They remain less than significant with the same mitigation that was included in the original EIR. And this is the list of the significant unavoidable impacts of implementation of the general plan update with the specific sub areas. So this is an odd slide, the subtopics seem incorrect, but air quality, cultural resources, including historical resources, greenhouse gas emissions, noise, both construction and these subtopics are off, I apologize. Population and housing growth because it exceeds the regional plan projections, greenhouse gas emissions. So the only change in significant impact, unavoidable impacts, concluded from the recirculated EIR are the recreation impacts. And these two impacts are worded such that they specifically address the CEQA checklist questions to determine significance. So basically that population growth and park need under the general plan update generated by the public, the general plan update implementation would potentially cause existing facilities to deteriorate and would also require demand for new facilities that could result in physical impacts to the environment. So CEQA requires that a range of reasonable alternatives be developed to address significant impacts of the project as proposed, and also defined in order that they attain at least the majority of the project objectives defined for the project, the general plan update. So again, because we have a new significant impact in recreation, we revisited alternatives. These first three alternatives have not been updated other than in the summary table and the conclusions to incorporate the recreation impact. So we added the new alternative being a reduced park alternative, a substantial reduction in housing units within the focus areas, no additional units whatsoever on the 17th Grand, Main Street, and Santa Ana Boulevard focus areas, and a reduction in the 55 Dyer Bristol area residential units, and 2.8 million square feet reduction in non-residential. So this is a substantial reduction in development opportunities in comparison to the proposed general plan, but it is not as stringent as the RTP-SCS consistency alternative, which I think, yeah, this table shows that the 220 RTP regional transportation plan population housing consistency alternative reduces development quite a bit more than the reduced park demand. Bottom line, that is the reason why it was still concluded to be the environmentally superior alternative among the alternatives. This just summarizes the impacts that were determined to be significant under each alternative. There's a table updating this in the recirculated EIR to put all the context for the new project alternative. So actually the reduced park demand alternative reduced as many impacts as the RTP SCS consistency alternative, and had, similar to the RTP alternative, increased 2 impacts and had similar impacts for 6 topics. But the reason the SCS alternative was still determined to be superior alternative is because it eliminated one significant impact of the proposed project, which was utilities and services. And the reduced park demand alternative did not do that. And unfortunately, the reduced park demand alternative also did not reduce the recreation impact to less than significant, primarily because we couldn't come up with an alternative that retrofitted existing conditions, and existing conditions are substantially below the city's standard. And that with the lack of available open space for development of parks, we worked at length with the city and couldn't identify an alternative that actually would eliminate that significant impact. And to summarize, the notice availability, the website all show where and how to submit comments. I want to emphasize again that comments are to be limited to the recirculated EIR sections. If we receive comments on other sections, we will refer the author to the original final EIR, or just simply state that this is not part of the content of the recirculated EIR. And I would also say that we will be, I understand this hearing, this study session is recorded. We will be preparing at a minimum summary of responses to all comments received for this study session. It's very difficult to do in comparison to written comments. So we would encourage the public to submit written comments if at all possible. Of course, email or letters submitted to this address. Do you want me to take questions now, or are you going to go ahead? Okay.
One quick interjection as well. If it's all right with the commission, we'd like to pull down the screen and let them try and reboot it so that we might have full screen for the study session. If that's all right.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
It's not too bad.
I would imagine so.
Yeah, while they're doing that, we can do questions from the commission.
John, would you, the order of business?
You can share commission first. The commission may ask questions to consult at this point in time.
Commissioner Wu, would you like to ask any questions?
Just to help me understand it. The EIR and the general plan are not standalone documents. They have a relationship to each other.
The general plan update is the project description for the EIR.
Okay, so, and we had a lot of meetings out there, and I see the comments opening up from different neighborhood and different groups are entering into the environmental justice and environmental review. I feel kind of challenged though, and how do you read what one group say, what one neighborhood say, and what is actually happening out in the community. And then I do have a specific question regarding the noise study. How is the noise study done? It just focuses on vibration, or because we have more traffic coming down Bristol from the 22 right now to South 45. People are getting vacation involved in the 17 and Bristol, so they're going to our neighborhood. And since the pandemic, there are people that decide decided that they should have more noise in the car. You know, loud mufflers or take the mufflers off and play the music louder. So did the study include those kind of noises?
Yeah, let me answer your environmental justice and overlap between the general plan update and CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act first. First of all, I share your challenge because there are so many comments on the general plan. It's being updated at the same time. There's just an amazing level of public outreach for the plan. And so Melanie's group obviously is getting a lot of feedback. And I think that confusion is shared by much of the public. You know, I have an issue with the general plan. I'm going to comment on the EIR because this is my opportunity, and I'm going to express some dissatisfaction with whatever it is, the land use or whatever. So that overlap is common, definitely a big issue for this project. When we receive the comments, we will just respond that it is not an environmental issue. The final EIR will say this does not come under the realm of CEQA. We will forward this comment city staff and to decision makers for consideration, and it's kind of black and white. The overlap between environmental justice is very timely and really challenging because SB 1000 that requires environmental justice and general plan update is not a CEQA issue at all. It is leaning that way. We anticipate within 2 years from now, it will be a CEQA requirement. But right now it isn't. There aren't any checklist questions. We don't have to address it. So, you know, so when we're coming back, and I would say 80–85% of the supplemental information we've provided in this recirculated EIR is all environmental justice related. You know, you have the state attorney general commenting, as they are on most of our projects now. They're saying what they want in an EIR. So we have tempered that with the information that it is not a CEQA issue. We're providing the analysis as required. I think it's, and it does very much overlap with CEQA issues that we are required to address: hazards, pollution. Yeah.
There were some requirements that we needed to state. We also have robust meetings. We got their impression. As someone that sits and listens to those comments,
Right,
and the states, my sense that some of this is historical in terms of the role we place in industry and types of development and zoning in poor neighborhoods to disadvantaged people. That's historical.
mm-hmm.
And I think we're up to it. How do you correct it? It's not the charge of the study, but in the general plan, if we're trying to address it, and we state some goals. Those goals does talk about neighborhood quality of life and those kinds of things. So I think we met that charge. But I think that what I'm hearing is that it will go back to us as commissioners on a site-by-site basis to kind of take all this and look at that. And that's where the challenge in terms will contribute to the more need for a park, which means that
Right.
we'll do more density. At the same time, we'll be asked by the community to have more affordable housing and more the housing in general, but that gives you more dense housing. The private market is making that dense market, which is not the same as
Right.
the commercial one on big assemblage land using manufacturing areas like that, which may be better because it's in the area. But when we hear we don't want any, high density, we're not able to sort that out. So that's a comment.
I think it's so important, and the project is so interesting because of that. And I think one of the things I feel that the public in general on this project and most projects and most jurisdictions I work with, they're not clear on the fact that CEQA addresses the project-related impacts on existing conditions. So what you have here, especially with environmental justice issues, and like you said, the results of past decisions, the industrial uses and stuff that are next door to lower income or disadvantaged communities, that's an existing problem that the general plan and under SB 1000 go to great lengths to correct and improve over the future. But the impacts that the EIR analyzes is not retrofitting those existing problems. It's looking at just the impact of the proposed growth on existing conditions. So we try to clarify that in the EIR, and we try real clearly to still disclose all those existing issues. But I think there's a misunderstanding that the EIR should provide mitigation to solve all the existing problems. And that's just not how the environmental law is written.
And the best way to clarify as we get the study, standing is whether we intended to do it. It is growing.
And what we try to highlight in the EIR is not only all the policies, but the regulatory standards, like emission standards that over time they already are improving air quality and hazard issues, and the implementation of those takes a long time, and nobody wants to hear that. They want to hear a fix to existing problems, but that's we disclose both what we're required to and the positive impact of a lot of those policies. Want to address your noise question? The EIR analyzes models all the increase in traffic noise, and does so not only for the proposed project, but for the project alternatives. So the traffic was modeled and the noise was modeled.
Did you go into residential areas?
We went, well, we're trying to think. We didn't model every single roadway in the city. The model, but we came back and focused on the arterials that had a certain threshold of increase in traffic that would result in a 3 decibel, the significance threshold for noise, for traffic noise, and then looked at those and modeled those more closely. So that is, I would say there's a lot more focus on noise, traffic noise in the EIR noise section than vibration. Vibration is usually a pretty minimal section, relying primarily on regulatory requirements. Yeah. So we address those, and then I think if you look back, we'll have comments on the original EIR on noise impacts and increase of substantial increase in housing density and the concern of traffic noise related to that traffic. So that is all analyzed. And again, noise is a significant unavoidable impact of the proposed project.
Thank you.
Okay, and one more question, and a question that often comes up. Interesting that you say there may be a COVID relationship to cars wanting to be noisy or music or mufflers or whatever. That is just an enforcement issue. We don't deal with that in CEQA.
Mr. Albright, do you have any questions?
Yes, I just have sort of one broad question. I'm just trying to get oriented and like to understand the process at a very high level where we're at in terms of the environment. So I'm not that clear on what a program EIR is and how that helps us with the future project EIRs that we'll be seeing as each individual project comes up. So why are we starting with, say, a program EIR instead of like a multi-phase EIR or a subject EIR? I didn't know there was so many EIRs.
There are.
Yes, yes.
Keeps me in business.
Yeah, so if you could answer that, that'd be great.
Yeah, maybe I could go back briefly to that program EIR slide.
I did see that, yeah.
Okay. And it's actually very important, and it's very important. Program EIR, and the tiering procedures in CEQA in general, the intent is to streamline environmental review. That's not to mean circumvent it. It means not to be redundant with it. So the air quality issues and the compliance with the regional requirements for air quality and consistency with the area-wide air quality master plan. All those things are regional issues and really not very relevant on a project-specific proposal. So when you look at those, when you come in, let me give you an example. For example, a project comes in 55 Dyer focus area is a high density project that's housing that's consistent with the general plan land use designation. So we're going to look at that. If you know said, okay, propose your scope of work on this. The first thing we're going to do is see if it's consistent with the general plan update, see if it's consistent with the policies and the implementation measures and everything. And if it is, then there's different levels of analysis that it could qualify for review. This is going to be more CEQA than you ever wanted, so I should streamline my discussion. But the most limited analysis for that project is going to be that is completely covered in the program EIR. People have the misunderstanding that if you do a program EIR, then you're going to subsequently have a project EIR. That's not true. You can have, if that project comes in, it's completely consistent with the program EIR and regulatory requirements, you know, your geologic studies, your hydrology, everything like that, mitigate everything else without CEQA mitigation, then it is to be found within the scope of the program EIR. And you fill out the checklist, there's no public review. It's consistent with the general plan. It's basically already entitled from a CEQA standpoint.
So there's no mitigating.
Okay, if the project, if there's new impacts that result in a significant impact that require mitigation, there's your mitigated neg deck. If it has to be disclosed and there's no significant new impact and doesn't require mitigation, but needs a lot of clarification and analysis, you're going to do that with an EIR addendum. And then, of course, there are your subsequent project EIRs for anything that has a new significant impact, or obviously anything that's inconsistent with the general plan.
Okay, and then the other question I had just was something that I'm thinking in the back of my head is the impacts of the water supply, although I didn't get it documented in that regard, but it is something that I'm always thinking about just because that extensively we work about water supply problems now. This is the water treatment. This is
right, available water supply. Yeah. That is almost always, and definitely for general plan, relies on the urban water management plan and the projections in the urban water management plan, and it was not a significant unavoidable impact. So my recollection is it must be that it is within the projected growth of the urban water management plan, but I'd have to go look at detail. But that's how it's going to be addressed on the general plan. An individual project, on the other hand, needs water supply assessment.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Commissioner McLaughlin.
Oh, sorry. Just ask a question. Okay.
Mr. Pham, do you have any questions?
I have a quick question in regards to the alternatives that we were discussing, and I think the preferred alternative was a reduction in housing, reduction in
Square footage as well, and jobs, I think. Yeah, here's, oh no, that's not alternatives. Here's the alternatives. The CEQA requires you identify an environmentally superior alternative. So I'm just a nuance, but I wouldn't call that the preferred alternative, because you can have the environmentally superior alternative that doesn't meet any of the project objectives or the fewest project objectives. But that, as you can see here, that is the 2020 RTP SES alternative is consistent with the 2020 Sustainable Community Strategy Plan, which you can see the project as it stands under the general plan update, 115,000 units. The RTP has 83,000. So there's a substantial difference looking at that alternative. And the reason to look at that alternative right away is because the fact that the proposed general plan update is inconsistent with that plan, the RTP SES, is a significant impact. For CEQA, because it's inconsistent with that regional plan, that's a significant unavoidable impact. And that's why we have to look at for an alternative. So that's why that evaluates the alternative. It is the environmentally superior alternative primarily because it reduces the land use the most. So everything from energy, public services, utilities, traffic, reduces all the impacts.
This just as just the general public. I guess it's hard to look at the recommendation as a reduction in housing or rural areas, and then on the other hand, that we have a housing crisis.
Right.
And I know those aren't mutually exclusive because that's one of the factors that are involved, but I guess you could explain how we kind of balance those two things.
This is why your job's lots harder than mine. Because, Melanie will do it, but the EIR is just simply objective analysis. So the extent to which we look at we weigh the pros, cons of the projects is only in light of the project objectives that have been defined by the lead agency. And if you look at the EIR alternative section, it will go for each alternative. Our assessment that the city's concurred on, and once we've gone back and forth on the ability of that particular alternative to meet that objective. But CEQA's alternative analysis very limited to objective analysis and environmental impacts, and then ability to meet the project objectives.
This is more or less the analysis of the current analysis of the impact, not to say what is going to be implemented. That's just a clarification I want to get. It's just so people who are listening know that recommendation and analysis general plan, and that things that you're listening out now, whatever it is in terms of reduction in buildable area, that's not what's being implemented. It's more of your recommendation, what's a superior alternative.
Yeah, I'll say, just because I've done this so long and I've seen so many practitioners use the language in their alternatives that this alternative is rejected, because that's problematic. Because again, it's not our job to reject an alternative. That's your job. So it's ours just to identify which has the most environmental impacts, which is environmentally superior, and which meets the objectives. The objectives are, there's going to be an objective to meet housing need. But, I don't know how many objectives are offhand, but so it's balancing those objectives. And I'm clear on your question about what you're going to implement and existing conditions. I was a little confused by that.
I guess, for my clarification sake, your analysis isn't targeting anything in particular. Your recommendation is more or less analyzing the general plan, its potential impact, and then providing alternatives that can remedy those impacts.
To remedy the significant impacts. And then again, the CEQA requirement is to determine a reasonable range of alternatives to address those. So that could be 3 alternatives, it could be 10 alternatives. It's an area of CEQA that's oftentimes challenged. Sure. Anything else?
Mr. Ramos, do you have any questions?
Yes, thank you. I do have a few questions. First, I'd like to ask if we can please go back to the slide that shows the different environmental justice areas throughout the city.
The environmental justice areas?
Yes, please.
Sure.
And can the presenter please explain how these areas were identified?
They are identified by the state. by, it's the, it's called CalEnviro, CalEnviro screen. It's Cal EPA. There's 21 different indicators that are categorized into two areas. One being the pollution load level hazards. There's, about half the indicators fall within that. Then the other half of the indicators are socioeconomic. There's low income or lower education availability, et cetera. So that it weighs those two. And then the areas that you're seeing in pink here are within the 75% percentile, that, so they're the 25% worse within the state. So the city has, all these areas in hot pink are considered EJ areas within the 25% worst of those combined indicators. And all that detail, including an appendix of detailing all the indicators and all the communities, is in an appendix in the recirculated EIR.
Thank you.
Sure.
I have a few more questions. So I know you presented different levels of impact for various things to consider, such as hazards and hazardous materials. And it was during that part of the presentation that there was the lead in soil was also mentioned. And I believe I saw that it said that there was no mitigation required. Can you please clarify? I don't know if you can go back to that slide and please clarify
Sure.
what that means.
And I'm sorry, what, you had a question about the lead concentration, or?
So I have a question on whether or not this recirculated EIR is recommending mitigation for that, for the lead in the soil.
The direct answer is no. But let me explain why. Well, a couple reasons. First of all, CEQA requires that mandates that feasible mitigation be provided for any impact of the project that could be significant. But again, that is impacts of the proposed project. So what the EIR does relative, recirculated EIR, the supplemental analysis for lead, describes the existing conditions, the existing concentrations, the location of those concentrations relative to existing industrial uses, environmental justice areas, et cetera. Then we look at the potential for the proposed general plan update to impact lead concentration in soils. And the update is primarily focused on remedying those kind of issues with numerous and expanded as of last year policies, refined policies to address it, including community participation and disclosure and monitoring and research, et cetera. So those are all incorporated in policies. Policies are part of the project description. And then we also look at the industrial land use, the industrial flex, for example, the new designations and where they are and their potential to result in an increase in lead concentration. And they're not heavy industrial land uses proposed in the general plan update. So the reason no mitigation is provided is because the project itself, the general plan update, doesn't create an issue for lead concentration in soils. That said, the EIR fully documents the existing condition and issue with lead concentration in soils and the potential for regulatory requirements and the general plan update policies to address that. But those are the reasons no mitigation is provided through CEQA. The project itself, the general plan update, would actually have a positive impact with respect to lead concentration in soils.
Thank you for that clarification. And the last question that I have for now is around recreation and the reasonable alternatives that were presented. And I'm wondering why Willowick and the use of Willowick for additional green and open space wasn't mentioned or considered as a reasonable alternative.
I'm sorry, didn't understand that. The use of what?
The use of the Willowick golf course.
Melanie might be able to answer this better. Willowick is an existing use and not part of the proposed project.
Just a quick clarification. So in this type of map, it uses the city public parks that the city has the authority to program. And Willowick, while it's acknowledged in the environmental as an open space resource, like the other golf course and the, some of the joint use with the schools, it's not under the domain of the city to manage and control permanently. So it's not included as a park on this map.
And is it being included or considered or discussed in the general plan?
On the general plan land use map, you'll notice that it's remaining green, which green is to affirm it as open space, but open space as, if you will, private open space, or not as a city public park open space. So there's that distinction when you're looking at that calculation of 2 acres per thousand, the goal for the city, that relates to public parks that are open to the community year round, all the time, and the city has authority over that.
So Willowick isn't in the equation.
Is not in the equation because of that. Thank you. Pardon me?
Thank you.
Yeah, right.
But Willowick is not
It's,
also considered to be a proposed.
it's an existing open space, period, open space.
But again,
Yeah,
defining as you have on this chart, it's not a park. It's not a proposed park.
right. I'll use a comparison to the cemeteries. The cemeteries are considered open space,
Well,
But
that was
they're-
a comparison of the board.
but they're not a public park, even though people picnic and hike and walk through them.
And it's a private property. You might also look at, there's a general response to the Willowick issue, which none of the, issues have changed in the final EIR that went to the Planning Commission last year, the response comments. That's a topical area.
Mr. Ramos, did you have any more?
Yes, I did want to complete my comment. Thank you. I just saw on the statement that Melanie made in regards to the general plan, affirming that Willowick is open space and affirming and using the word affirm, does that mean that the general plan will seek, I know that the city does not have control over the use of Willowick, as the city is not the owner, even though it's within the city boundaries. But in affirming, would that mean that policies that are in the general plan will seek to work with the city of Garden Grove to ensure that that remains as open and green space?
There is not a policy that states that the city will lobby to keep Willowick 100% open space. There's no specific comment like that. But the fact that we have it colored green on our land use map means that until our council chooses to change that in cooperation with Garden Grove or otherwise, until our council changes that, our policy is that that is open space.
And could such policies to encourage or to collaborate with the city of Garden Grove to maintain that as open space be added into the general plan if it's what we're consistently hearing from the community and have been hearing for over 2 years now?
That definitely is a policy that could be placed. That's at the pleasure of the commission and the council for anything of that nature.
Okay, and would should a policy of that sort be recommended tonight or at a future meeting?
It can be recommended at any point.
Okay,
To clarify.
and those will be all my comments for now. Thank you.
So it's currently designated as open space. If Garden Grove decided to develop it with some sort of commercial development, would it require a general plan amendment or something of that nature? And perhaps from Planning Commission and City Council.
Yes, it would. Even though it's another government, a city owns that, they would need to come to us for an amendment. Different than school districts, for instance.
Commissioner Wu.
So basically, that's just analysis, inventory to classify existing land and community. And I want to connect the dots to the presentation tonight. If this is just analysis of what is and some future trend, it's a policy question, you know, to look at those trends and the impact of the environment, such as Commissioner Reddy points to the water usage. It's a regional statewide problem that impacts us, but we have a state-driven mandate for more housing that butts against, you know, like how do you put housing and then how do you get water to it? And if there's more people, more water, you know, and the demand for bonds, we take out the bonds, and you know, it just makes a lot of questions that as we look at each site review, you know, what are we continuing, what policy are we using as guidance, and will we have that in the general plan, or we will just, they seem to kind of contradict things at a time, you know. And we're trying to be a good city. I don't think that anything we're doing is malice towards any group. Mm-hmm. And I've seen that in the writing. It just, it challenges me to want affordable housing because I'm not affordable housing advocate. But at the same time, there's a limitation for growth. So I'm starting thinking maybe as a policy, we need to start thinking about the limitation that we have as a growing city.
One of the things that's been voiced in the past is the notion of trade-offs. So as we move forward on the policy decisions, and we've talked about what are our city's objectives, we've talked about housing is important, quality of life parks is important, water, utilities important. So as we look at our different objectives, there will likely be some trade-offs. And that's where as a community, we have to decide how we lean into those trade-offs and what programs can, you know, that do we have in our draft general plan, which we have a number that will help soften those trade-offs, but there's some trade-offs.
And can make all groups happy.
It's a challenge to
we need to work as a whole and looking at the limitation and how can we maintain a good quality of life for everyone, and includes everyone, and kind of move forward until someone could invent the water sources, the new technology.
Right.
So I'm struggling with that, and it's nothing that we could do. I think in the general plan, you reflect the community need that would challenge us to where do we get the land for that, where do we get the property, you know, are they willing to build, invest, and those are other factors that are beyond the scope of the EIR study on that. So I want to thank you for directing us to the inventory. I guess it's a clear picture, but it also tells us that while we may want something there as a community, it may not be within the jurisdiction.
And when we do transition to the work study session, we can kind of regroup a little bit as well.
Discuss these things as well. Commission.
Going back to the numbers, you know, the summary chart of the numbers, what's the time frame that's taken into consideration as far as growth goes? Because I'm just trying to determine, it's like 83,538.
It's
the existing inventory.
The build out for these different scenarios is 2045.
2045.
Right. So 25 years.
So looking at quite a few years to build an additional 30,000 units. Is that?
Well, for the new growth for the general plan, it's a little over 17,000. And then the number, well, and then the number that's already adopted by prior updates is that 15,000 that's been referenced, where it says specific plans and special zoning. That's the harbor plan, transit zoning code, Metro East. That includes those that have already been gone before us.
But I'm going back to the chart, the other chart, the summary chart.
This is the summary chart for the proposed plan compared to existing conditions. The other summary was for project alternatives. Did you want to see that again?
That's what I was talking to.
Yeah.
Sure.
So here's, you were looking at 83,000 as the existing.
So 83,000 is a projection for the future. So this wouldn't be inventory mode. This would be future build out.
So this is 83,000 additional units.
I think he's looking at the
Total.
RTP plan.
Right. So the dwelling, let's start on the left side. So the general plan update, we mentioned that the growth for what's being proposed in this general plan update is about 17,000. So the 115,000 is citywide. If you include what's on the ground, what's proposed,
It's additional.
it's
growth,
all, everything,
It's additional growth,
plus existing,
plus replacement,
plus what's already been adopted in prior land use plans.
okay.
It's all the potential theoretical build out.
It's all the existing jobs that are being done today.
The 170, yeah, the jobs would be the 170 would be built on,
Not jobs,
oh, sorry, yeah.
projects that are being worked on today, are they in 115,000?
Yes.
Or are they,
They would be, yes, because that's part of what's in our existing policy plan.
and so at this point in time, what we have on the books that are projects like the Heritage Project, some of them.
Those are, right, that's included.
Legacy Project, those are in the 115,000.
So they've already been entitled, they already have general plan that's been adopted to entitle that. That's
So basically,
part of it.
anything that's been entitled over the last couple of years
are in that number.
are the new numbers.
I wouldn't call them new numbers. They're part of that.
Well, part
Whole
of the
number.
general plan. No, the new
Yeah.
general plan.
I think if, could we go back to,
Yeah.
let me try it with the other one, just. So the one that you've mentioned, Heritage, you've mentioned Legacy or Transit Zoning Code, things that have been entitled, they would be under the line item that's gray, the second one that's gray.
Right, specific plans.
Yeah, it says the 15,000. They would, in theory, be included in those areas, or they would be included in the other part that says other city areas at the bottom that has another 2,000 growth. But the bottom line is they're already taken into account.
So, we were looking at 115,000 number is right here.
Yeah.
So it includes existing, the growth,
Right.
and the the growth under the new plan and everything that's been approved.
Right. Yeah. So here's the existing. Right. So here's the existing residential, the growth, and then the total. And then like what Joanne was just saying, you look at the totals in all three categories, and that gets you the 115 for the entire citywide.
At
So-
build out by 2045.
Right. It gives an alternative. Instead of going for this model, you can go for a more reduced one that would get you less than 115.
But the one that says it wouldn't have any impact on the recreation parts at this point in time, that number is going to be less right now, or is it going to be?
There was.
No, there isn't. The reduced park demand alternative substantially reduces housing units and more minimally reduces square footage, but it doesn't eliminate the significant impacts to recreation. And that is because it can't remedy the existing problem with the ratio of, the availability of parks per population capita. So it didn't matter how much we reduced it. The existing condition is so below standard that we couldn't come up with a plan that would mitigate it to less than significant, an alternative. In other words, if you had no growth at all, you would still have a significant impact, just like the existing general plan has a significant impact.
Is it
And that's
predicated on the fact that you have more usage at this point in time? Or what's the deterioration factor?
I think it's just, so again, we're in the CEQA lens. In the CEQA lens, we all know we have park division city. So CEQA in their lens is just really putting a limelight on that and saying it's a significant situation, period, right? And these different alternatives on just a more common sense standpoint, if you had less housing being built for the future, you'll have less impact, less people using the parks. That's common sense. And then you have CEQA that looks at it from the CEQA lens.
Another way to put that, the previous table shows that we have an existing 78,000 housing units, but even under the existing approved general plan, there's 101,000, almost 102,000. So you've got substantial growth already allowed under your existing general plan that would result in significant impact. And again, that's not, there's great policies and there's more policies now and everything. A big part of the problem is the available open space, the available vacant property or much less any public property to develop parks and facilities.
Can you plan for without addressing this or I guess are these alternatives in FYI or is it
Exactly. The alternatives are an FYI. They're for full disclosure for, a purpose of CEQA is to disclose all the impacts of the project, then to look at alternatives to avoid those. So it's just information for you to consider. Not at all. Not at all.
I do have a couple of questions.
Sure.
I just want to understand the significance. I think it's slide 23 or 24. Regarding the
I don't know where the slide numbers are with it.
lessons significant,
Okay,
significant unavoidable impacts.
sure.
What is the, I noticed we have population and housing as unavoidable, exceeding regional housing population projections. It's not an unavoidable impact. It seems like it's avoidable through land use or zoning, but what's the significance?
Okay, the very specific significant impact here is inconsistency with SCAG's regional transportation plan, sustainable communities strategy, because that's a sequence checklist question. Would the project be consistent with those projections? And I think when we looked at it, the proposed plan is 20,000 plus housing units over their projections for 2045. So as long as the general plan update is defined with those numbers, you have a significant unavoidable impact. That's why we looked at the alternatives that would reduce that impact less than significant would be the RTP-SCS consistent alternative, which would only allow 83,000 units. And I believe your existing plan might allow more than that. It does. So even your existing plan is inconsistent. And which is, just as an aside, those numbers are updated when cities update their general plans, then typically SCAG updates those figures to be consistent with the city's plans. So it's kind of a significant impact that eliminates itself, but this is how CEQA addresses it, to disclose that you're that much over the regional projections.
Okay, thank you. Another question, I think there had been, we talked about water earlier. I think the previous EIR and the full build out indicated a shortage of water in a dry year. So does the EIR address mitigation on that through conservation or recycling? Or anything?
I think I'll be completely honest, I haven't revisited that section for over a year. Again, it's dependent. It's based on the urban water management plan. For any general plan update, looks at the projections of the adopted urban water management plan that of course is updated every 5 years. And looks at a single drought year and 3 dry years, et cetera. The finding, we had a Fusco Engineering was the civil engineer on this project. It's coming back to me. I drilled them so much on water supply. And we worked with the city's water department as well, back and forth on interpretation. I'd have to go back to the detail, but water supply assessment and that review was done, not a WSA water supply assessment, impact review was done by Fusco Engineering. We worked closely, I don't remember the individuals at water department, city's water department, and made that finding that it was consistent, that it wasn't a significant impact and was consistent with the urban water management plan.
And I think the other issue that many people are concerned about are the hazardous material sites. I think about over 500 have been identified. And will there be any sort of mitigation plan in place in either the EIR or the general plan that addresses how we're going to deal with those?
I'll take the, from the CEQA standpoint, those hazardous sites are existing conditions and the EIR analyzes impacts from the project on top of existing conditions. But the EIR also discloses all the regulatory requirements. And again, with this recirculated EIR, maps all those hazardous waste facilities and generators, et cetera, and documents the supplemental policies that the city has added over the last 6 months. There are specific hazard plans which would become under the realm of general planning that Melanie might address, but not related to CEQA. Sure.
We move into the public comments. Have we received any written comments, Madam Secretary?
Yes, we received 6 comments and those are all posted to the website.
Thank you. The public hearing is now open. We will now take comments from the public. Secretary, do we have any members of the public who would like to comment?
If you'd like to comment on this item, please select the hand icon if you're participating via Zoom, or if you're calling in, please press *9 now. It shows that we have about 6 speakers, so we'll go ahead and start. We'll go ahead and start with Pamela Valera. Please go ahead. We're timing. We'll start the timer over here and you have 3 minutes. Please unmute yourself and start speaking.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Hello, my name is Pam Galera. I'm representing the Santiago Creek Greenway Alliance. We are a nonprofit 501c3 that was established in 1991. Our mission is to restore the Santiago Creek and to establish a multi-purpose trail system. We implore the city of Santa Ana to continue the Santiago Creek bike path and riding and hiking trail from the 5 freeway to the Santa Ana River. This connection will not only address active transportation needs, but also recreation. It will also address other needs such as equity, health, environmental justice, and quality of life. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Tyler Asada, please go ahead, you have 3 minutes. And please unmute yourself.
Okay, yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. So I wanted to ask a few questions regarding the environmental impact report on the soil lead thing. I know that you just like during Isuri's question, Commissioner Isuri's question, you talked a little bit about it. Could you go back to that slide really quick?
This section is just for public comments. We don't go through the slides.
Do you want me to put it on?
Cool. So I just wanted to ask, like, aren't y'all building like a streetcar in that area? And also, like in the areas where there's like the hot maps for the Santa Ana soil lead crisis, the parts in red. And also, like, what metrics did you say you're using again? You said you were using CEQA and Callan virus screen, but what about the study that's been published and had press coverage on numerous occasions in like the LA Times, in GRIST, in multiple other sources where the soil lead levels exceeded the state limit by 50 times. So just wanted to like ask about some of those, ask those two questions. Yeah, that one.
Thank you. This session is for public comment.
We can go ahead to the next speaker if you're finished. Okay, next speaker is Cynthia Guerra. Please go ahead and mute yourself. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, yes, my name is Cynthia Guerra, and I'm a resident of Santana living in Ward 4 and a member of the Willowwood Coalition. So I know we talked a little bit about the deficit, the park deficit, and the presentation went over it, but I'd like to repeat that briefly. So just to repeat this, Santana Municipal Code states that the city should meet a parkland standard of 2 acres per every 1,000 residents. According to the recirculated EIR, the city failed to meet that standard. It is currently at a deficit of 118.60 acres. Mind you, the California Quimby Act actually recommends a parkland standard of 3 acres per 1,000 residents for a city with a population the size of Santana, which is higher than the standard the city has failed to meet. Furthermore, under the update, the total parkland efficiency is projected to increase to 299.48 acres once the city achieves a population increase and build out anticipated by the general plan, unless the city develops new parks. I have heard council members and city staff say the city is built out. In fact, in this meeting, what I keep hearing is that our existing situation is so bad when it comes to parks that the city could not come up with a policy to address this park deficit. If that is true, then that is even more reason for the city to pursue stronger policies that will truly preserve existing open space and create new open space wherever possible. As a lifelong resident of Santana with family currently living here as well, I cannot accept the statement that the impact of the general plan update on recreation and open space is significant but unavoidable, and that the alternatives will not fully address the impact. As a first step, the city should increase the open space elements park standard to a ratio of 3 acres per 1,000 residents, and should amend the municipal code to reflect that standard. In addition, the city should revise the open space element in the following ways. The city should make the no net loss implementation action a policy. This policy should apply to open space as well as to parkland and strengthen provisions on replacement of lost open space. Currently, the no net loss implementation action does not seem to specifically include open space that is not technically defined as parkland, like Willowwick. Preserving the existing open space would go a long way to help address our park deficit. Furthermore, the no net loss policy should state that there shall be no net loss of open space in the city, excluding any acreage of a golf course that is redeveloped solely for 100% below market rate housing. Any open space lost due to development should be replaced at a ratio of at least 1:1. Other things that the city could do is increase parkland dedication requirements for new development projects in order to meet the city's enhanced park standard. extend parkland dedication requirements to a broader range of market rate development projects, require that parkland created by dedication be located within a half-mile walking distance of the associated development, and include more specific incentive mechanisms to create new parkland, especially within park deficient and environmental justice areas. Open space was consistently named as one of the top needs of residents in the environmental justice forums the city held earlier this year and the environmental justice survey. The general plan should advise to actually meet this express need. I think I just heard that I might have been at time, and it's really unfortunate that I only get 3 minutes because it seems like the city is out of ideas on how to address this, but
Okay, next speaker is
Ms. Patricia Flores Ibarra. Ms. Flores Ibarra, can you please unmute yourself?
Yeah, this is Patricia Flores Ibarra. I'm the Director of Orange County Environmental Justice. And I wanted to make a comment on the environmental impact report. First of all, I am happy to see that remediation and a dedication to remediation is included in the general plan update. There's just a couple of things related to the environmental impact report that I wanted to point out. One is that there are several studies that indicate that remediating lead and paint in old homes can actually directly relate to an increase in lead contamination in the soil because of the released paint particles when that remediation effort happens. So I would want to see something in the environmental impact report to address mitigating the impacts of that remediation in lead-based paint homes to make sure that we don't face the same issue again of an uptick in soil lead contamination because we're engaging in remediation efforts in other kind of places, right? And so I can definitely forward those studies, Melanie, if you like, so you can take a look at that, but I think that needs to be taken into account in the mitigation part. In addition, I think that the general plan outlines remediation efforts over just 2022. And I think that both the efforts themselves will probably take place over a much longer time, but also in order to take into account the mitigating factors of that remediation effort and the kind of effects that we'll have to deal with in the long run, most likely that will have to take into account more years than just 2022. So I think that also needs to be reflected in the environmental impact report. Finally, last year, I believe there was a notice from the Office of the Attorney General for California saying that this general plan update needed to have more of a comprehensive community engagement process before it can move forward. And I would like to comment that I do believe that the community engagement process up till now hasn't sufficiently assessed the needs of Santana community members. As if I'm correct, I believe it was 746 surveys were completed through this process out of a total of 335,000 residents. So that means only 0.2% of Santana residents were actually surveyed for the process. And so that's very much under the population of Santana, and especially it's underneath the projected numbers that we need to really gauge the needs of environmental justice communities in Santana. And so I think that there needs to be a bit more of a community engagement process before this plan can move forward, and that should be accounted for in the environmental impact report, at the very least, including like an additional series of roundtables with community members, but also specifically around soil lead policies and the environmental lead policies in general, before we can move forward on that, especially considering the recent passage of the Santana Public Health and Climate Emergency Resolution. So I'd like to point out those factors that mitigation should take into account the effects of increased soil lead contamination from remediating lead paint, and then the need for a further community engagement process to comply with the directives of the Office of the Attorney General. Thank you.
Very much.
Our next speaker is Mr. Manny Escamilla. Will you please unmute yourself? You have 3 minutes.
Okay, hello, everyone. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, just glad to see this plan moving along. I know it's been many years for lots of folks involved. So hello, commissioners and staff. I guess I just wanted to highlight and maybe echo some of the earlier comments on that the city might not be thinking at least imaginatively enough. If we're looking at this slide, there's actually a portion of the Santa Ana River between Fountain Valley and ourselves. It looks like a little kind of black line with a little hook that's part of the county. The city doesn't actually kind of have any land use authority over that, but if we're talking about the Santa Ana River plan and ways to kind of rewild and kind of create a larger recreational open space, that land remains annexable. So we can literally go in and annex it. I'm sure there's a reason we haven't done so already, probably related to security and kind of other costs. But we are trying to add open space. That's one potential location right along our borders that would add, potentially I think it's up to 100 acres almost of additional open space in a river trail that we could play with. So that's something we haven't necessarily discussed. There's also not just the Willowick Golf Course, but also the Riverview Golf Course that is currently partially owned by the city and the County of Orange. And we are not really looking at that to potentially do park space in the northern part of the river trail. If we want to be super aggressive, we can even try to see if we can do a land swap with the city of Orange for kind of continuing that whole thing up. So I think there's still places to imagine open space in the city to reach that higher number. And I'm actually not happy that we replace the language with achieve, I think is now with strive to achieve. So we're not really even committing to 2 acres per 1,000 residents with the revised implementation table. So I would ask the commissioners to, maybe take a pause, really look through what appears to be maybe page 273 and onwards, that, we're actually tweaking most of the language when it comes to the policies. And I think a lot of what we need to take a look at least from the commission perspective, is what those changes were. I would highly recommend that you all kind of take this home and take a look at it and use your authority as a commission to make recommendations that are coming directly from you all. As I always like to joke, there's always a third option, and that's that you can recommend whatever the commission wants to recommend. It doesn't necessarily have to follow staff recommendation. And this is, like I believe Commissioner Ramos mentioned, the appropriate time to make recommendations like setting aside Willowick or committing to some mechanism that requires resident voting. If we're going to convert more than an acre of open space into any other use, those types of ideas that come directly from the commission are within your purview and power. And I really hope that you use that opportunity here, both to take a little bit more time to dive into the details. If you haven't been able to read the document, please don't sign off on it. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Mr. Adolfo Sierra. Will you please unmute yourself? You have 3 minutes.
Hello, hi. My name is Adolfo Sierra. I'm the acting president for the Madison Park Neighborhood Association. And I would like to comment also on the letter that was sent by Javier Becerra, the Attorney General back then. This letter was sent in October of 2020, and it was asking the city to implement the SB 1000 within the general plan updates. And I believe also that the EIR and the CEQA and all the documents generated that is helping to focus on the GPU, the general plan updates, are very important. They are related. And if somebody's saying that they're not related somehow, or they're not as important, or they just only focusing on some specific issue, I think it's going to bring the city into more issues that we have. Issues such as the air quality on the city, as you can see, commissioners, and you probably live in some of the most polluted areas within the city, because at least on the southeast side, close to the 55, by the road tracks, railroad tracks, we have over about 43 contaminants companies. They pollute every single day, and the accumulation, it's another issue with the pollution. Water pollution, we have water pollution of close to Dyer and the 55. I think they working on mitigating that. That's not included in general plan updates for the future, because we not only have one section that is being polluted, and also we have what the other people commented, we have issues with lead on the soil. So there's a lot of issues going on. And the recreational issue, the open space issue. I believe if the city is not looking into mitigating these issues, we're going to end up, if you accept this EIR, recirculated EIR, which is created more issues. And those issues are going to stay with us for 25 years. So I believe you have in your hands a very critical, a very important document that it needs to be look very in detail, and because it's really important. The other, I want to mention also that the environmental law clinic with UCI is looking into these documents as we're speaking. We have meetings with them. They've been helping us for already a few years. And we would like to see that the suggestions from the environmental law clinic, along with the SB 1000 letter from the Department of State from last year, be taken into account.
I have to ask you to close your comments.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Do we have any other speakers?
Yes, next we have Erica Gonzalez. Will you please unmute yourself? You have 3 minutes.
Yes, hi, my name is Erica Gonzalez. I'm from the Delhi neighborhood. I'm a lifelong resident of Santana. I'm a community organizer. I'm a small business owner and I work for the school system here in Santana. I'm a very proud resident and I must say that I agree with all the other comments that have been made thus far. I'd also like to mention all of the construction that's been going on South Main Street and all of the air pollution. I know the air quality. I live in one of the highest impacted areas when it comes to environmental justice because I live right on the corner of like Main and Warner. And this is where 2 areas of the city are having heavy construction at the same time, mind you. So I'd like to see the report include, because I didn't see that it mentioned, I was a little late, so I apologize if it did, but I didn't see it mention anything in regards to parking. Because parking is definitely an issue within the city in all areas of the city, but especially in those heavy hit areas. And an EIR should address secondary parking impacts caused by the traffic congestion. And like I said, we're right in the middle of 2 intersections of heavy construction. There's a lot of digging and gravel and a lot of dust. And so the air quality is already poor here. So it's definitely going to only decrease in quality over the years, especially with this project that's going to be taking place over a few years here in the city. And then I also wanted to mention that on Warner Avenue, there's going to be public land or left over land from homes that were taken over for the widening project on Warner. So I know that I've been told by the city that we can't discuss what's going to happen with those areas because we're not on that part or that phase of the project yet. But being that we're discussing this report and the general plan update, I'd like to bring that up to consideration, or at least mention it and have it be on record that land is going to be open. It's going to be public land, and that should be utilized to help in the park deficit that we face. I would like to see more inclusion and input from the community. Like everyone else said, I'm from the Delhi Neighborhood Association, and we should be doing much more outreach within the community. The methods that the city has been using over the years has failed. So we really need to utilize having more people going door knocking, having more people, including those folks who don't have access to internet, who don't have access to email, because I found out through email and of course through like social media. So again, the construction from Main Street is creating poor air quality. We need to freeze. I saw that there's going to be a freeze on building additional units in this area, because I want to mention that on South Main Street on Pomona Street, where the A1 Fabric outlet is, it was mentioned that there was going to be luxury apartments built there. So now that we're freezing, I'd like it to be on record that project should not go through. It hasn't been fully developed or planned yet, but just want to bring that up. And then the zoning has been updated on the south.
Next, we have Kayla Villegas. Will you please unmute yourself? You will have 3 minutes.
Yes, hi everyone. My name is Kayla Villegas. I am the community organizer for OCEJ. And basically, I wanted to come in here and say a little bit more about our lead contamination crisis, but it really stopped me on my tracks when I realized there were no mitigation measures at all. And I understood the explanation and everything. And I want to echo Patricia's comments earlier, how remediation processes in homes that were lead based and that use paint that had lead in them can also increase lead contamination in our soil. So with that, again, I just want to echo PJ's comment, Patricia's comment, and the need for further outreach. I honestly, it feels like this commission is feeling a little lazy. It's not acceptable that I have to explain that this lead contamination crisis is directly impacting the environment that we live in. And it simply seems that you guys are just avoiding responsibility and accountability. And that's not okay. So I want you all to be leaders in this city, please, and start taking measures to actually create a safe environment for Santa Ana residents. Also, one of my coworkers, Kayla, I believe she had her hand up and they kept putting it down. So thank you.
Thank you.
The next person is Leonel Flores. Will you please unmute yourself? You have 3 minutes.
Hello, everyone. My name is Leonel Flores, lifelong resident of Madison Park neighborhood and community organizer for the MPNA Green programs. I just wanted to point out something that I think the commission should definitely pay attention to that could be of concern to the city that was said by the person who presented today. And I think you should really take a look at this EIR because of it. From my understanding, when it came to the issue of recreations and open space, basically what I understood is that since the city can't make that problem better, it's okay for the city to make it worse. And that's what she was saying through their analysis. Um, Honestly, that does not sound right to me. I don't think the city should be okay with an analysis like this. The city should never want to make a situation worse. So I think you should really reconsider what this analysis is saying in the EIR. Because making a situation worse is definitely a move in the wrong direction. So please pay attention to that and reconsider it because, you know, we wouldn't want the city to end up in any problems because of the comment that presenter made. And then the second comment I'd like to make is that in regards to the community input, as someone mentioned, the input still wasn't at a satisfactory level, less than a percentage point, less than 1,000 people. So we'd like to get more community input into the general plan before it goes forward. But also we would like to see what input has been given by the school board, because I know that supposedly there's an ad hoc with the city, but we haven't heard anything that's come from those meetings. So will the input from the school board be included in the general plan when it comes out? And will we get to see what they have to contribute, because they unanimously supported our environmental justice proclamation last November. So they're in favor of, you know, creating policy to help alleviate these conditions for these disadvantaged neighborhoods. So those are just the two comments I wanted to make.
Thank you, Mr. Flores. Do we have any other speakers?
Chair, we do not have any speakers, and just an FYI, we did have one speaker, Kyle Rosado, who did raise the hand a couple of times, but they already did provide a comment previously for the full 3 minutes. So if you would like to let them speak, we can go ahead, or if not, we can move on.
So we'll move forward.
Okay. So we do not have any other speakers.
Would staff like to make any additional responses to the public comment?
Mr. Chair, we're going to take some of the written comments. No, how to address that.
Don't have speakers to speak in the audience.
Do we?
And the written comments, Commissioner, will are posted on the website. We don't read those into the record.
Okay, the public hearing is now closed. Does the commission have any other questions for staff? Start with Commissioner Already.
No other comments.
Thank you. Commissioner Robb.
None at this moment.
Commissioner Wu.
I want to thank staff and consultant. It's a very arduous job and a great amount of outreach out there, especially with the environmental justice folks. And I know that when a couple of sign on complained about not being included, they got included right away and got the information later right away from the state. And thank you for the assistance to that. Finally, after all these years, they felt included about 11, able to kind of validate what they've been talking about, health issues, about their children for elections. So I think that was a big win for the city and for the city as well. We got a tough job, guys.
Thank you. Commissioner Ramos, do you have any comments?
Yes, I do. I would like to make a policy recommendation for the general plan. Staff can I make my recommendation now, or should I make it as at the time when we make a motion?
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear that.
She's asking, she wants to make a policy recommendation. She's asking if she should do that now or when the motion is made.
I'll call for motions once all the commissioners have made comments.
Thank you. And then I also have a question for staff.
Chair of Commissioners, I would just clarify, this item was a receive and file item only. There's no action intended on it tonight per the agenda. So the item is just receive and file public comments. Those comments will be considered along with all the other comments that were submitted regarding the draft EIR. So can commissioners make comments? As a public comment, or is yes, in general comments, but in terms of questions or direct response to public comments, not generally, no. And no action items are on the agenda tonight for this item, except for the receiving file of public comments.
My understanding is we'll be voting on this in October, and at that point, Commissioner Ramos, we can make a motion and conditions or any policy recommendations.
That's correct. The substantive matter will return to you. This my understanding is October 25th, but feel free to confirm that with staff.
Okay. Well, I'll say the motion that I would have made tonight, or the policy recommendation that I had, which was that the city of Santa Ana work collaboratively with the city of Garden Grove to preserve the Willowwood Golf Course as publicly accessible open space for Santa Ana residents. And I say that today because I want it to be a part of the public record. And then I would also like for staff to clarify the purpose of tonight's receive and file and how receiving and filing this recirculated EIR tonight moves this process forward, and how delaying this receive and file would affect this process as well. Or continuing this receive and file.
My understanding is that the purpose today was to receive public comment, including commissioners, And any additional updates to the report or modifications could be made prior to the next meeting. Unless staff has anything to add to that.
Perhaps I can defer to staff in terms of the chronology here.
Would you mind asking the question again? I'm a little confused on what the question is.
Yes, I would just like for staff to please clarify, so everybody can understand how this receive and file moves this process forward and what the upcoming opportunities for public comments will be. And then how continuing this receive and file would impact this process again.
I didn't hear the last part of it. But this is an opportunity tonight that's not required, but the city of Santa Ana has taken it as practice to actually hold a public hearing to pause and encourage people to give comments on the environmental impact report. So the idea tonight is the written comments that we get and the verbal comments that we'll package as comments. If they're related to the environmental impact report, they will be responded to in the recirculated environmental impact report.
So like when you said that there's a comment, just like the commissioner made a comment, that would be interlineated in the comment section at the back of the EIR, where there's a comment and then a response to the comment.
It depends if it's related to the environmental impact report, and maybe Joanne can make that distinction for us. So everyone's bringing in a number of comments, but not all of them are related specifically to CEQA and the topic. So we're certainly listening and hearing and absorbing all the comments tonight, but only some are relevant to CEQA.
And there was one summary of how revised comments, revisions would be made to the document that I think was incorrect. If you make comments now, we don't go back and revise the document now. The draft EIR is out for public review until a week from today. That closes the review period. And then we work with the city to formally respond to those comments. So, and that to prepare the final EIR. And the final EIR is the response comments from this meeting, all the written comments, all the emailed comments. It also includes other section of the final EIR are revisions to the draft EIR, which are a combination of revisions of errors that people found or things that should be supplemented, or oftentimes also just mistakes that we find, the city finds. So none of those can trigger recirculation. They can't be a new significant impact or anything. But other than that, they're the final EIR, include the revisions. So there's nothing before, and then that final EIR comes back to the Planning Commission and goes to City Council. But there's nothing interim between that where we would be revising the document. Just, it will be revised in the final EIR.
Thank you. So my understanding is then that this was an additional opportunity for comments to be received during this public comment period.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
There has been a long, year-long process for public input that is notified, either through the city manager mail, the neighborhood neighborhood meetings, and the public hearings that have been scheduled, and various groups, right?
All that public outreach was really part of the general plan update outreach project program, and not related to CEQA specifically. It's documented in the recirculated EIR, all the detailed meetings and all the outreach that occurred. And obviously the output of that, the result of that was, tons of revisions and supplemental policies and very detailed implementation actions.
And again, I would just offer that possibly in the work study session, we can, staff can give a little bit of an overview of that speaks to some of the comments that were made that maybe weren't related to the environmental, but they're related to the general plan and our coordination with the community.
All right, thank you. You have any other questions, Commissioner Ramos?
Not at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Mr.
Melanie, you said this in the very beginning, and that is, I think there was a subtle theme that came through some of the comments that we heard already about the fact that there was not enough outreach. Just on the basis, what kind of outreach do you do with the EIR as far as people to contact?
So let me try and frame the outreach and not try and distinguish environmental versus just outreach. Right. Yeah. So it's all kind of one package in a way, right? They complement each other. So since we were here in November and the Planning Commission directed us to go back and do additional outreach, we have done what I would offer a significant amount of outreach. And I would also offer that outreach, particularly with grassroots, neighborhood, citywide, is it's an evolution. It is a constant outreach. It's not going to happen in 6 months, a year, 2 years. It's a conversation that continues on and on. So I would offer that since January, we actually worked with a number of the folks that spoke tonight. We actually worked with them in a roundtable forum and presented our outreach proposal and got some feedback with the intention of trying to do the best that we could do. And we really appreciate their time and their input. As you can appreciate, everyone would always like more. So we did everything from having yard signs in each of the neighborhoods to solicit, take a survey, come to the workshop. And again, this is 30 different neighborhoods. We coordinated with the neighborhood leaders in addition to the advocate groups and welcomed their help in getting the word out, and many of them did that. As you know, social media is always a key outlet. We encourage the groups that we were working with to also share that message out, and we did. And I think as the advocates would appreciate, because they also have tried to get folks to their forums, we all go through this, you never get as many folks as you would wish. And you put a lot of effort into it. You do the very best you can. You network. Everything's trilingual, and you facilitate. And you just have to keep at it. It's a journey that you just need to keep at it. So I would offer that we did a very significant environmental justice outreach since January, and more than any other city I know of. But I'm sure there's some that are doing stellar work out there, but we have done an amazing job, I think. Again, were we able to include all the comments that the advocates were asking for? No. Did we work genuinely to do so? Yes. With the lead conversation, we actually had a separate roundtable regarding lead, and Orange County Environmental Justice, UCI, and importantly, our partner, Orange County Healthcare Agency, who really is a key player in that world. We've all worked together to craft some different actions and policies. So while it's not as far as we would like, we would love to clean up climate change tomorrow, but unfortunately, took a long time to happen. It's going to take a little while to cure. Same thing with all of our other concerns. We're going to have to all work together and in complement to each other. And that's what, we feel like we've made some good relationships with advocates, but we do understand and appreciate their perspective. But in answer to your question, long answer to your question, there's been a fair amount of outreach, I would offer.
We directed the staff to go back, like you said, in November, and focus on not just the environment, not just the plan itself, but the environmental justice and several other aspects. You stepped up the methods of communication, but we haven't been able to move the needle that much further as to participation and feedback. And I think it's probably symptomatic of, where we are right now with the pandemic situation. That could very well be a situation. But you did everything you could from a virtual perspective too.
Yeah, right. We believe we did, although, again, working with our roundtable participants for outreach on this, we look forward to continuing that outreach and continuing to get word out. But it is a longer term process. And as you mentioned, with COVID and so many other challenges people have, it's really hard to get folks out, to participate.
You did a good job.
Yeah, I don't have any further comments. So we'll move on to the next item, work study session.
Chair, I'm sorry, Chair. We do need to motion a second to receive and file the comments there
Oh, we
on.
do need to
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Do I hear a motion to receive and file?
I make a motion that we receive and file. Second.
Motion is made by Commissioner Wu and seconded by Commissioner McLaughlin. Madam Secretary, you do roll call vote, please.
Yes, roll call. Commissioner Alvarez.
Yes.
Commissioner McLaughlin.
Aye.
Commissioner Ramos.
Aye.
Commissioner Wu.
Yes.
Vice Chair Pham. And Chair Marcy.
Aye.
Motion passes by majority vote with Commissioner Calderon absent.
That concludes our business calendar. Moving on to a work study calendar. Please note no action will be taken on this item. Before we begin, are there any members of the public that would like to comment on this item? We have 2 speakers in the house. Mr. Helvig?
Can we talk after the presentation or?
If you'd like to, Chair, push it to the end, but we normally have it in the beginning for work study.
Is there anybody online?
We have one hand raised on Zoom.
Let's do it now, I guess. Well, I wanted to say congratulations to everybody in Santa Ana. We're #1 now. We're the densest city in California. We're the fourth densest city in the nation now. New York City and 2 cities in New Jersey beat us out. We keep it up, we can get #3. We're only about 400 people off per acre. So listening to the environmental impact report and everything associated with that dovetails really well with the general plan, as it should. The point of reference, though, is we're not dealing with 17,000 more units in Santa Ana over the course of this thing. We're dealing with 36,000. It's 15,000 are already in the pipeline, but the other 17 are in the focus areas. What's interesting to note, though, is the city council just approved a climate change resolution to help with the green initiatives and everything else. But the general plan, the first 3 focus areas, Main Street, Grand Avenue, and West Santa Ana Boulevard, will increase the housing count by 3,500, almost 3,600 housing units, but it's going to cause a loss of 5,600 jobs. Where are those jobs going to be? They're going to be in other cities because we're pushing people out of Santa Ana. These focus areas are moving people out of Santa Ana. 2 of the focus areas are having a net increase, but they're also adding, 14,000 housing units and increasing jobs by 12,000. So yeah, we do get an overall net increase, but what about the people we're displacing? What are we doing for those people? I think it's wrong that we go ahead and have a general plan that's written for developers and not for residents. We're increasing the density higher and higher every year. You talked about water. Hoover Dam is at 66% capacity for power production because the water level is so low. about another 10 years, they call it, I think, a dead pool, where they won't even be able to produce power from Hoover Dam because the water will be so low. We're 119 feet from that limit right now. It's at 1069 right now. And at 950 foot elevation, they shut off the turbines, no more power, water usage goes down substantially. Governor Newsom has already declared drought conditions in 41 out of the 58 counties. It's only a matter of time. We can't keep on going down the road we're going and expect to see things improve. We talk about open space, and I think it's a crime that we say Willowick is open space. It's not a park. It's not a parkland. It's not a proposed park. It's just a play on words. We need to keep these parks alive. We need to do something about it now before it's too late, not continue developing at the rate we're going. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Yeah, Ms. Radkin.
Good evening, Chairman and Commissioners. I'm Diane Fradkin, 29-year resident of Park Santiago, and I am submitting to you a comment letter, just some general comments and then some specific comments to the land use element of the general plan update. The first one I want to discuss is the park and open space component. This is missing and has been for a while, and it still hasn't been remedied. It needs to be more defined. There's an attachment from a slide that was presented back in August that Melanie was able to give me. And I think that should be, that specific information should be included in the land use element of the general plan. So we have some definition and ways of solving the ongoing deficit and the overall need for more park space. Just to continue on that, I know that there are a lot of the projects that have rooftop decks and balconies. Those are project amenities and really shouldn't be counted as open space for the city. It's, you know, a project use. The other item I wanted to touch on was in the overall scheme of the various replanned zones. Anywhere there is single family residential, there should not be anything above a 2-story building planned or built next to that, because that's not a symbiotic relationship, having something that's really, really high dense next to single family residential. So I think that just needs to be outlined again, specifically in the land use element. And then probably my biggest bugaboo right now is I would love to see the 17th Street and Grand Avenue properties, the medical arts and the adjacent shopping center planned as a specific plan. I think there's an opportunity there because it's such a large parcel, but I mean, both are large parcels. And so in the land use element, to see that as a specific plan use with a variety of uses, right now it just shows the urban neighborhood, and then it could be even more defined with a huge park space there with services that kind of are in tangent with the residents there, retail components on the bottom, you know, multiple stories of residential on top of that. And I think that would help tailor what we really need in the city than just another, you know, area that shows urban neighborhood. So those are my comments. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. We have someone on.
We do. Ms. Pamela Galera, will you please unmute yourself? Pamela, you are muted. If you wish to speak, please unmute yourself now. You have 3 minutes. Okay, we'll move on to the next caller. We can come back to her. Manny Escamilla, please go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Hello, everyone. Thank you again. This is kind of a nice little bonus for me. I thought we only had one chance to talk, so this is nice to be able to comment more generally on the general plan. I do, want to, I guess, just reemphasize the idea of like creatively using existing land for park space. Hopefully, the two callers previously were commenting would be supportive of what the first commenter of the night said, which is to create a connecting trail, a bike trail, down the the Santiago Creek over into the Santa Ana River Trail. I think we had some previous experience where we actually added water back into the creek bed. It brought back a lot of local wildlife. We actually do have a couple of endangered animals, mostly I think fish, amphibians, and I'm not even sure what the little starfish are called, whatever kind of animal those are. So, giving those opportunities to create riparian habitat within the city, I think would be a great opportunity. But I do disagree on the idea that, we don't need to kind of focus in on adding additional housing. So anyone of my generation knows that, the, I guess, preeminent luxury housing of our era is the single family detached home. So right now, if I was to try to purchase a home, I'm looking at about $650,000, pretty much at the minimum end. If I have something that's falling down, I might be able to squeeze out a deal for about $550,000. And there's basically just a detachment even from, I'd say, overly educated, white collar, middle class professionals in a younger demographic in the existing housing market throughout coastal California. So we all do need to do our part. I think that gentle density is the direction that we need to move towards. I do believe that if the city looks at the overall types of planning that we're doing, that we should focus on creating much more smaller lot projects. Pretty much anything under 8 units, things that do fit within the neighborhood character of various places. Bungalow courts, walk-ups with commercial on the ground floor, things that do kind of focus in on one small parcel. I think we're still too wedded to the idea that we essentially have to put together large pieces of property in order to have efficiencies of scale for large out-of-town developers, and then that's the only way we can build. And what I'd like this commission to really kind of move more in the direction of is helping smaller scale developers on smaller scale plots, whether that's an ADU, a simple duplex, or things that are kind of more in keeping with what you find in some of our historic neighborhoods, right? So I love French Park, and what's really cool about that is those old American Four Squares and Victorians were converted into little apartment units and serve multiple families. They look great in their neighborhood and they can be done properly. Obviously, we're not going to go with the full Victorian style now, but properly done Spanish or Neo Deco would work in a lot of neighborhoods. But I'm hoping that our overall plan does kind of move in that direction. So sorry if my time's up, but thank you all and have a good night.
All right, thank you.
Ms. Pamela Galera, are you there?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, you have 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you. I apologize for being late. I was having trouble unmuting. I am also having trouble not being able to turn on my video, so that's all right. My name is Pamela Galera. I am representing the Santiago Creek Greenway Alliance, which is an environmental 501c3 that was established in 1991 with the purpose of restoring the Santiago Creek and establishing a multi-purpose trail system. We do demand that the Santiago Creek, a Santiago Creek bike path and a riding and hiking trail be included on several elements of the general plan, from the terminus under the 5 Freeway to the Santa Ana River. This will address many issues, including active transportation, recreation, and open space. I am an expert in this field. I am a licensed landscape architect and served as the park planner for the city of Orange. My project was the Santiago Creek bike path through the city of Orange. I now serve as the park manager for the city of Anaheim. And in my career, I have implemented many, many miles of trails. I would be happy to consult with the city as an advocate, both professionally and also for the Santiago Creek Greenway Alliance. We can assist the city in grants, both in providing letters of recommendation and actually helping the city to identify and write grants. We also work with the restoration, actually working in the creek. So I do offer both my services as an individual and our nonprofit. At this point, we're just asking for the city to include this alignment on the general plan. And of course, the very, very complicated engineering will be worked out at a later time. I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Valera. Do we have any other online?
Yes, we have Miss Erica Gonzalez. Please unmute yourself.
Yes, hello again. I just wanted to make the comment in regards to the general plan update and the zoning that's on the South Main Street corridor. All of the South Main Street corridor from First all the way down to Dyer has been rezoned from commercial business to urban neighborhood. I just really want to reiterate that I personally, I live here. I have a business on Main Street. The first caller who was mentioning about the focus area and the people who are affected by these focus areas, I am one of those people. So I just want to really ensure that our voices are heard and that the community input is really taken into consideration with this update of the general plan. Because with this new zoning, it's pretty clear to me that it hasn't been. I don't really understand what the urban neighborhood zoning is going to open up, what kind of gateway. To me, it sounds like gentrification. That's what code for gentrification. So that's really what we've been fighting against this entire process. I would be really, really disappointed in the city if we did end up having more urbanized areas and more downtown Santa Ana along the corridor, because the businesses that are currently on the corridor are honestly suffering a lot from all of the construction that's happening. The city has failed to provide communication when it comes to the construction that's being done with the homeowners as well as the business owners. We don't get notified when there's going to be construction. My office was closed for 2 weeks and I didn't even get notified that was going to happen. I just showed up one day and my door I couldn't even get to it because there was literally piping and everything was exposed in front of my office and I got no notification. And I'm one of the people that I have been included in these roundtables. That's why I am so disappointed in the lack of communication that's been between the city, the residents, and the business owners. So I really want to ensure that our voices are being heard and that our input is taken into consideration, because with this new zoning, I really want more clarification on what that even means, an urban neighborhood. And then I also wanted to mention the Standard Avenue project, because I don't know if that EIR even mentions, or if you are aware that there's VOCs in the soil and the groundwater off of Standard Avenue. And there's a project that's being proposed, actually being required by the state because of all of the contaminants that are in that area. And that project is going to be over the span of 10 years because it's so toxic and the VOC levels are so high. So we need to work together to come to figure out a different way and a different route to complete this project. And I really would appreciate more of an update and inclusion of what's happening with this general plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Mr. Adolfo Sierra. If you'd like to unmute yourself.
This is Adolfo Sierra. I'm the acting president for Madison Park Neighborhood Association, a longtime resident. I've been living in this area for the last 27 years and also working in the same area for almost the same time. I've been participating on the Neighborhood Association for the last 23 years. And I've been involved and I'm very invested within the community that I live at and work at. And one of the things I want to go back again for the general plan updates is mention that the letter that it was written by Javier Becerra, the Attorney General, in October 16, 2020, and this is from the State of California Department of Justice. One of the recommendations to the city is very clear And we've been working as a neighborhood association, UCI, and other collaborators from the UCI, the other school from UCI as well, and other community-based organizations on including in the general plan updates, things like this. The number one recommendation from the Attorney General on the letter says to reduce pollution exposure. That's number one. The second one, it says improve air quality. Now, going back to the previous comment about the EIR, nothing has been done to do these things and be included on the general plan. I really asking you to consider this and be part of the general public comments and make sure that we have a better city within the next 25 years, not only for ourselves, but also for the children. And also I wanna comment also in the general plan, I don't believe we have any input or any participation at this point from the Santa Ana Unified School District and the city of Santa Ana. Some of the meetings that we've been having in the past, they told us that they're gonna be reaching to them and they communicating. At this point, I haven't seen anything on the document stating that one of the largest school districts, not only in the county, but in the state, it's not reaching to one of the most important also players in this issue, because we affecting with the environmental justice issues, we affecting all these children. This is school children from K to 12. And that includes also the colleges around us. So I really beg you to please consider on the general plan to include also on the talks, on the conversation, and as an authentic collaborator, the Santa Ana Unified School District. Thank you.
Caller with the last three numbers 525, will you please identify yourself and then unmute yourself to speak?
You'll need to press *9 to unmute yourself. Caller with the last three numbers 525, your hand is raised. Sure, that is the
Hello,
last.
can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Hello?
Yes, can you please identify yourself?
Yes, so my name is Cynthia Guerra, and I'm a resident of Santana living in Ward 4 and a member of the Rise of Buildout Coalition. I just wanted to repeat my comment because I don't think it was very clear the first time I gave it. So, I have heard elected officials and city staff say that the city's built out. So the only thing left for Santana residents is rooftop parks or no parks. In fact, in this meeting, I kept hearing in the discussion of the EIR that our existing situation is so bad that the city could not come up with a policy to address this park deficit. If that is true, then that is even more reason for the city to pursue stronger policies that would truly preserve existing open space and create new open space wherever possible. As a lifelong resident of Santana with family currently living here as well, I cannot accept the statement that the impact of the general plan update on the recreation and open space is significant but unavoidable, and that the alternatives will not fully address the impact. The current deficit is at a park deficit is 118.64 acres. And under the update, the total parkland deficiency is projected to increase to 299.48 acres once the city achieves the population increase and build out anticipated by the general plan. That is, unless the city develops new parks. As a first step, the city should increase the open space elements park standard to a ratio of 3 acres per 1,000 residents, because it's currently only at 2, and it should amend the municipal code to reflect this standard. The California Assembly Act actually recommends a parkland standard of 3 acres per 1,000 residents for a city with a population the size of Santana, which is a higher standard than the one that the city has failed to meet. In addition, the city should revise the open space element in the following ways. The city should make no net loss policy implementation action. The city should make the no net loss implementation action a policy. It's currently just an implementation action, but it should become a policy. And this policy should apply to open space as well as to parkland and strengthen provisions on replacement of lost open space. Currently, the no net loss implementation action does not seem to specifically include open space that is not technically parkland or defined as parkland. And this applies to property like Willowick, that is open space but not technically defined as parkland. Preserving the existing open space would go a long way to help address our park deficit. So there is open space in Santana. The no net loss policy should state that there shall be no net loss of open space in the city, excluding any acreage of golf course that is redeveloped solely for 100% below market rate housing. And again, that's below market rate housing because I don't think we should be sacrificing open space for market rate housing. And any open space lost to development should be replaced at a ratio of at least 1:1. Additionally, the city could increase the parkland dedication requirements for new development projects in order to meet the city's enhanced park standard, extended parkland dedication requirements to a broader range of market rate development projects, require that parkland created by dedication be located within a half-mile walking distance of the associated development, and include more specific incentive mechanisms to create new parkland, especially within park deficit and environmental.
If there's anyone else that'd like to speak on this, please go ahead. And if you have not spoken already, please go ahead and select the hand icon or select *9 now. We'll wait a few seconds. Chair, that concludes the comments for this item.
Thank you. We'll now hear a presentation from staff.
Okay, thank you. Round two, here we go. So in complement to the public hearing for the environmental impact report, we wanted to take the opportunity to have a study session to talk. Louder, is that what you're saying? Can you hear me okay?
Doesn't sound like it's on.
Yeah, every time it's on.
The green light is on. There's a green light on. Does it need to be higher maybe? Is that better? Can you hear me now? Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, so to complement the public hearing on the environmental, we wanted to take the opportunity to talk a little bit more with the commission about some aspects of the general plan, and we'll just jump right in. So you've seen this slide before. What's on the screen now is the vision for the city that has come out through the general plan. I'll just touch on it, some of the buzzwords, that it's celebrating our past, working together, creating a sustainable future, actively embracing the power of diversity, investing in resources to create economic opportunity for the next generation. Lots of really good things, and I think things that some of the folks who spoke earlier are close to their values as well. So again, there's 11 different elements. They each are intended to try and support that vision. They're each intended to be in keeping with our values at the bottom of the screen: culture, sustainability, health, education, equity. And again, it's a journey, but we think we've made some good inroads on some of these policies and programs. So I wanted to touch bases on just where did the land use plan come from? That growth that we've been talking about and that the environmental impact report is evaluating, where did it come from? What shaped it? So I'll just highlight that a bit. So the first component was we had a general plan advisory group in 2017, 2018. And that was an exercise where we had a variety of folks from advocates to residents to commissioners to a couple of developers, affordable and otherwise, and a balance of folks. And we asked them to help identify, where do you think the opportunity areas are for transition in the city? And that was really the beginning of those focus area boundaries. That, in complement, of course, with community outreach and survey input. And then again, important component, city council feedback along the way. And then pulling all that together and trying to see that through the lens of our values and the regional goals, be it reducing greenhouse gas, having housing, for the future, for the children of our future, and having more housing or more development and a little higher density on our transit corridors, again, to get people out of their car. So easier said than done, but those again are the sustainability core value and the regional goals, which we're all needing to be mindful of. So again, you've seen this map. The areas that are in blue are those 15,000 housing units, et cetera, that are already been adopted as part of our plan. And then the fuchsia, hot pink, if you will, deep pink are the ones that are our focus areas. Again, a product of looking at where are opportunity areas and where are those areas that could connect to other growth areas, if you will, like Harbor Boulevard, downtown, et cetera. So again, just to recap, these are the numbers from the growth forecasts. The numbers in yellow are the net growth for the areas that are already approved by council, already have projects moving forward on. And then the green circle are those numbers that are in the focus areas as they're presently proposed. So one thing we wanted to draw your attention to in the land use element, we heard the concerns from residents that, again, this is the general plan, and we actually will, if this were to go forward, the general plan, we don't have zoning in place, won't have zoning in place right when the general plan's adopted. So the idea was, how can we give some assurances that there will be guidelines so that new development will be appropriate, say, for single families. So this is a table that you can find in the very back of the implementation for the land use element. And the ones those two that are circled in orange, that's just as an example. So on South Main, where it's being proposed to be UN2, which would allow for 20 dwelling units per acre and a maximum of 3 stories. One would direct potential developers to look at 2 of our existing zones that we have, that they would look at that for design guidelines. So the first one that's in orange is our transit zoning code. And then the second one is actually our harbor plan. They both have been developed to address setbacks and being compatible with adjacent residential, as opposed to new SDs that don't have that benefit. So that's an example. And the example below is the same sort of thing, where in that line item, the UN 30 or urban neighborhood 30, which would allow maximum of 4 stories or 30 DUs per acre, would also look at this zoning criteria. So in the right are some visual examples that are in those actual documents so for UN2, the one above, it shows an example where it's two stories with those design standards, and the one at the bottom, again, these are the lower end of things, but this would also be where you have mixed use, the bottom right, where there's residential above and commercial at the bottom. So in complement to that, so that would be a good foundation. And then in complement to that, we have gone out for a request for proposal to formally put together zoning and development standards for whatever focus areas are adopted. And those would be could be corridor plans for the entire corridor for some consistency in design and applying neighborhood character needs. And like on South Main, looking at the historic context, the setback, maintaining those historic buildings and the history there. And then the proposal is to bring a contract to council at the end of the year in 2021. And we have the opportunity to do this because of state LEAP funding that's to help facilitate housing. So that's an opportunity. And the visual at the top is just an example. It's not one that's on our books right now, but it's an example where it shows the building to the right, in theory, is a 2-story single family. There's a property line. This particular standard says it needs to be 15 feet from the property line. In this case, this one goes up 2 stories, and then it's set back an additional 10 stories. So this is just one example of these new design standards that they would formalize that. And the one below is another way of doing the same sort of thing, where the first story can be 100%, kind of like this, where it can be 100% built out, 100% built out. And then when you get to the third story, there is not a third story, but the fourth story is set back so that only 75% of the area is able to be built out. So just give those as a couple of examples of where we have standards on our books now that will be interim guidelines to protect that context, and that also we're looking for this RFP and a consultant to assist with further refining that and making sure we're doing what is appropriate adjacent to our neighborhoods and protecting their character and quality. So one of the other things that we talked about, and we just want to continue to be transparent, is that it's hard to see the upper left, but the environmental, again, just as a reference, uses the 2019 population, which was a little over almost 335,000 population. And with the parkland we have on the books now, the 343 or so acres, we right now have 1.03 acres per thousand. And again, that doesn't include the golf courses and some other things. And if we were to move forward with the potential, again, theoretical build out that's in the general plan, we would be looking at a 0.8 acres per thousand. And this chart gives the translation of that in population. So you can see for each build out, for each focus area, the existing population, and then the build out population % growth. So overall, it's from a population standpoint, it'd be a 29% population growth in the city. Again, this is theoretical build out. So we just wanted to highlight some of those facts and figures so that we all, can absorb those and factor that into your thought processes and your thinking as you continue to read through the element further. And then just reiterate the outreach over time. So those values that we started with, they began when we did our first kickoff of outreach in late 2015 and 2016. We went to all the different focus areas of the advisory group in 2017, more pop-ups, and the framework we're looking at now, the policies and goals, have actually been out there on the street since 2018. So in 2019, we did a land use survey to get more feedback on some of those land use proposals. That included 5 community workshops. We touched bases with the Chamber of Commerce as well. We had study sessions with Planning Commission. And then we went into 2020, which of course, 2020 will always be 2020, a year like no other. And then at the end of the year, it was decided we should pause and do some additional outreach, particularly with the environmental justice folks. And so 2021, we were busy doing that. And pretty much here we are today. I would want to highlight, as I think Joanne mentioned, in the environmental, it does have a red line of the policy edits. So you'll be able to see the policy edits that were added or adjusted from the environmental justice outreach. And some of those I'd like to highlight because I think, you know, it is a good sized document, and sometimes everyone's doesn't have the opportunity to see all that it's there. But one I wanted to just touch bases on that the Santa Ana Unified was mentioned earlier. We have one action in the land use element that talks about promoting health. And it says partner with local organizations, Orange County Healthcare Agency, Latino Health Access, Santa Ana Unified, Coalition of Community Health Centers, et cetera, to increase blood level testing, outreach, education, referral services through a Promodora or community peer outreach model, et cetera, et cetera. I'll just kind of stop there. So I just want to acknowledge that there are, we are aware of the importance of schools, school district in particular, not just Santa Ana Unified, but also Garden Grove, who covers everything that's west of the Santa Ana River. And there's other items that deal with collaborating and monitoring. There's also an action, I think we've mentioned it before, that speaks to having a environmental quality portal. And again, that doesn't cover everyone that's maybe not as tapped into the computer, but we've already started it, and you can go there now. It's on our environmental justice page, and you can find out about cleanups, remediation, has context for the air district. We're trying to work with some of the advocates to get their information on there, on their good works with lead study, Madison Park's air quality programs that they've had an opportunity to get funding through the Air Resources Board. So we're all about collaboration. There's always more we can do, but we feel that there's a lot of strong policies and programs in here. Again, just wanted to kind of frame the conversation and open it up for questions or conversation, or where you think we can assist understanding, so that when we're back before you October 25th, you feel grounded and ready to make some recommendations. Welcome.
Thank you, Melanie. In light of that information, I would like to reopen the public hearing if there's anybody here who has any additional comments.
And just to clarify, it's not a public hearing, public comment period, and we do not have anyone who has raised their hand for an additional comment. Wait a few seconds. No speakers, Chair.
All right, thank you.
Can we have additional comments?
Yes.
Thank you, Dale Helvig again. One thing I think you guys need to look at is the policy statements in the general plan and the implementation actions in the general plan, and see if you can make a correlation between what policy is going to be impacted by the implementation. Because I don't think all the policies are being addressed by an implementation plan. So good luck on doing that. I think it's very important that we have a policy and we know what we're going to do to ensure that policy is successful. So please take a look at that when you have a chance. Thank you.
All right, we'll close the public comment. And move on to commissioner comments. I'll start with Commissioner Wu.
My question is, general plan doesn't necessarily create density. There's a historic density because of the type of working housing we have in certain neighborhoods that were built really quickly after World War II, and so close together, and 2-bedroom, 1 bath. And that was in contrast to people who came out from the East who had only apartment hotels and stuff. So we had a little backyard and so forth. So by that measure, weren't we already dense? And I'm trying not to refute the gentleman, because that's not my purpose, but to understand what he's talking about in terms of density. Because compared to other cities that have density, I don't know the percentage, and I'm not comparing them, but visually, we have density for multi-family uses, the apartments along corridors that are non-material, along transportation corridor. We try not to treat to the neighborhood. 25 is kind of debatable what that is. And but some things like Cita Cinco blends in with the neighborhood, improves it, and those kind of housing does meet a need in the community for people that don't have a lot of housing option that the private market takes over. Then some density are created because people have the money to buy these open homes that are small, and they create bigger homes. And so they do that on flat apartment homes. So that's not something that we've done in the policy, right? It's something that private investors done. The public housing we invested in is like simple. Then there are projects that last, or I don't know which previous talk about past previous talk, lower the amount we have to pay for getting a development going, so that goes into affordable housing. And those guys have, or that one guy has not done any project yet. It's still holding around and all that. So I'm trying to reconcile all these things. People say this and that. They're advocating a decision, but I'm trying to understand the density. Our residential is overcrowded with cars because more renters or some renters in the housing that are owner occupied. And it's just by the design of those things. We didn't design, like I have friends in my piece, they have a half an acre or acre of woods between houses, no fences. We live in a concrete city, so how do we kind of see density?
Well, I think the reality is we are an urban community. We are dense. And so the question for policymakers and those recommending to them is, what do you want our future to continue to be? Do we want to be like a Long Beach? Do we want to be like a Stockton? These are all a little bit bigger population cities, but they also are a bigger area, square miles. We're 20 some square miles and they're a little bit larger. So I guess going back to, we are urban, right? No doubt about it. We have our single family areas that are, have been able to preserve that. We have our lovely historic areas. But the question before everyone over the next month or two is, for the objectives of having some housing, more housing, like you mentioned, the one in your neighborhood that serves a purpose, and to try and encourage climate change, greenhouse gas, proactive housing, more development on transit corridors. Are those objectives important enough that we're willing to live with a little more urban?
And let's suppose planning commission and council, which they are not, adopt a policy of absolutely no growth for the next 10 years as a climate measure, and because of maybe it's more investment. So what would the impact of actually no growth in the general plan?
You want to take a stab at that, Fabiola?
I'd like to start by saying that every city is required to have a general plan. So our general plan only envisions having growth beginning in 2020 and 2021. So basically, we will have that rising coming. So if we don't adopt the general plan, basically what you're saying is you don't want to manage growth.
No, I'm just trying to understand what the impact would be.
So the impact So the impact will be that, growth is going to happen one way or another. We get that having it being dictated by court because we don't have, plan.
So in gathering the information, you just reflecting what is going on. Staff is not advocating sending information to policy. You are reflecting, you're gathering information and presenting it to policymakers to look at it. And you went out to the residents to ask them for that direction, and the plan incorporates some of those comments. So here we are now, or after you adopt a plan, having to use it on every little specific thing.
I think what Fabiola was alluding to as well is that the state we have to be mindful that there's state legislation that is pushing for housing, and that we need to be mindful of that, because if we don't plan for it, it might be planned for us. So that's the other thing we want to keep in mind.
You don't need to go which we already see it. They will come to us and see us and say, yeah.
Right.
So are they doing that with other cities in Orange County as well?
The legislation that's coming about, like SB 9 and SB 10, that's throughout the state. But I think going back to your first comment about density and such, it is for us to decide if we're going to buy into sustainability and affordable housing opportunities and all that, but we have to do it in a way that still provides a healthy environment. So that's where we did go over at a prior planning commission meeting, and it's the handout, the slide that was in Diane's comments, and it gave those different things for open space, related to open space, to try and lean into getting more open space and pushing that envelope so that there's a healthier balance.
And that's what I wanted the commission to understand, is that there's a balance. There's a balance in understanding the impact that historically that's had on certain areas. And why you can't imagine all this factory go away. You can't undo the streets, can't undo the small housing. But now you can say, okay, it's not like first, let's do better. Let's consider the impact of each project if we have to go for nice neighborhoods and the impact of the people. So I think that you can't solve it with just a policy. You have a lot of policies come from the state and all over. What we need to do is kind of, and I'm putting this for items, and is to put those considerations into our decision as subjects. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I have a related question. Are we making provisions in our general plan for like SB 9 or SB 10? Should they pass? What happens then if we're it's on the governor's table?
It is.
It's looking.
That is correct. And what would happen is we can't plan for what hasn't been approved. And unfortunately, if that happens, then at that point, we will look and we'll have to comply with state law. And that growth is not taken into account right now, and it will be even subject to CEQA because it will be allowed by right.
Commissioner Fan, you have any questions?
I guess when I'm looking at the numbers and after the slides, I think I'm not sure the models that we are using to anticipate growth. It seems that growth is always paired with population increase, but I think another lens to look at it, just the general public and general analysis, that even if we achieve the build out that we're projecting, doesn't mean that comes with the additional population so we do have a limited housing stock. So just because we're building out more doesn't mean we're going to have more people coming as like a one-on-one ratio. I believe from my interpretation of what I see here is that we do have a limited housing stock in Santa Ana. And so whether we do choose to densify some part of the city, it doesn't necessarily equate to more people coming in, but it just relieves the stress on our renters market as it is. And so, of course, I understand there are environmental implications to increase in square footage building air and whatnot, but there, like everyone's said before, there are trade-offs, right? If we want to give relief to the renting population in our cities, we have to build. And we have to build that are going to stress on our environment. And so we can't have everything. And that's what it seems like our general plan is trying to say is that it's not as far and wide as we're going to build out more, so there's more people. I think we're building out more to address certain issues that we have currently, and then after that, moving forward. That's how I mean.
Thank you. Commissioner Already, Commissioner Rock.
I just wanted to say I find it interesting the mission statement that you put up there with the shared vision. And I think that's something that we're going to truly go through with the shared vision. It is something we should take and make sure the rest of the city council and everybody else is involved in this process use the general plan as a shared vision. Because I think it's a great statement. It's well written. It's something we should carry forward as we try to complete this process. And I think it also demonstrates that this is supposed to be at this point, and that is for everybody in the city to come up with a shared vision. So, good job.
Thanks. I did want to take the opportunity to make one mention. Mr. Helbig's comment about the implementation and the policies. The way the implementation plan is set up, the actions correlate to the goal. So there is not a one-to-one. The actions are focused on primarily on the goal. So if you try and find a one-on-one, it will be a challenge. But if you have any questions on that or suggestions, feel free to reach out to staff.
But, I mean, it's just, I think the statement is built on process. I mean, you have something, and how do you take that entity, that goal, and get what's the process to get you?
Right.
I mean, it's an
the
engineered thought
yeah
that's going on, but at the same time, there's nothing. What you're saying is sort of like we'll address it each one as it comes.
You have a goal, and then some cities, they do take each policy and they have an action. We found that to be actually somewhat problematic because you can have a policy that you have the same input. It's a double-edged sword. So we thought it was more user-friendly to have the goal and then have the implementation actions. If there needs to be more implementation actions to further bolster a policy, that's an opportunity to put in as clarification or some suggestions that we could put into the final draft.
I think it is being suggested that that's what we intend to do.
Yeah. So we'll.
When it's not structured, sometimes
there's science and there's art. I think we're somewhere in the middle here.
Yeah, I think it's fluid. I don't see it as linear, so I think that's why
But we'll certainly work with all the suggestions that are expressed.
Thank you. Mr. Ramos, do you have any comments?
Yes, thank you. Just a few. So in the earlier presentation, I know that when we talked about the recirculated EIR, there was a slide that showed the overlap between the areas in the city that have been identified as environmental justice areas and the focus areas where the city was initially planning for more development. And as the general plan continues to be developed, I would just like to ask staff that they think very carefully about the impact that any changes in those focus areas, whether they be no new development or new development, that we think about the existing community there, specifically those EJ sensitive communities, and that staff work intentionally to prevent any displacement of those existing residents, and where possible, incorporate specific policies to address the prevention, to address displacement prevention. So that's one comment, and the other just on the lead in the soil and the testing that the city will be beginning for children that may have been exposed to lead. I know we received a public comment via email tonight during the meeting that asked that that program be expanded to also include testing for adults and others that may have been exposed to lead in their communities. So I would also ask staff that we explore expanding that program as much as possible and making it accessible to everyone in the city that may want to be tested for lead exposure. And then lastly, just again, I'll comment on Willowwood Golf Course and the city doing what it can to ensure that that's preserved and improved as accessible, publicly accessible open space. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Ramos. I'd like to thank staff for the presentation. And I just have one comment. I think it really, the common theme is open space, and I'd like us to explore the comment was made last meeting that we'd love to utilize some of the railroad land. I don't know what the future is for some of these rail spurs, but they do create quite a great opportunity to make connections between parks and between neighborhoods if they were going to be abandoned. So staff has looked into that. And then along those rail lines, you have the associated larger industrial and commercial plots of land that border housing developments that maybe we could get creative with a land swap or some sort of financial arrangement to make something happen. So that's another possibility, along with, of course, Willowwood we talk about, we'd love to have. And one of the callers made a comment about potentially annexing some land in the Santa River. I wasn't aware it was that possibility, but staff could investigate that a little bit, or have you.
A good part of Santa Ana River is in our boundaries. It's not in our, the county owns it, or others have jurisdiction, but it is in our boundaries. Yeah. But we'll double back on those sorts of things. Part of it's in, I think, Fountain Valley, part of it's in Santa Ana. Yeah. The flood control channel. Yeah, but I think that the point of the seeker probably was to look at what's the opportunity that we can create there. So we'll check with Parks and Recreation, and they're always looking for opportunities.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we will adjourn this meeting to our next regular meeting, which we held on Monday, September 27th. Oh, yes, sir.
The Artesian Pilar neighborhood in Santa Ana College, within the Civic Center, is providing a free concert this Saturday at 6 o'clock at Santa Ana College in front of the library. We invite the public and the neighborhood residents bring their little basket, no alcoholic beverages for on city property, and a chair or whatever, and enjoy the fresh air in that part of the city, and stars and some nice music. They'll start off with a mariachi group from the Orange County Children Therapeutic Art Center, and then Pacific Symphony will start playing around 7 o'clock. It is free and free parking. Parking lots 1, 3, and 6.
Thank you. Do we have any general comments from commissioners? All right, so we'll adjourn the meeting to Monday, September 27th, 2021 at 5:30. Thank you.